Hello, I'm Al Olson from the Rhode Island Music Hall of Fame, and I'm here to interview Ed Valley. How you doing, Ed?
I feel awful nice today. And how are you, Al?
I'm feeling very well, sometimes awful, but not necessarily today.
Okay.
Can you tell me about your childhood and family background, Ed?
Sure, I was born on December 22nd in 1951, which makes me an optimist because that is the first day of the winter solstice. And, as you know, the daylight hours begin to grow longer, and things are looking up. So, anyway, I was born in a log cabin. No, I'm only kidding. I wasn't really born in a log cabin. We
Oh,
didn't have log cabins then. Um, but anyway, yeah, early childhood family stuff. I don't know. Um,
well, tell us about your neighborhood.
well, it was a nice neighborhood. I went to a Catholic school. We could walk to school, and uh, I had a friend turn me into one of the nuns one time for telling a dirty joke in the schoolyard. This I think was second grade, and so anyway, we had some difficulties in Catholic school, but ended up transferring out of there after they locked me in a closet one day and forgot to let me out at the end of the day. So anyway, then we transferred over to a public school, which was, a lot different. It was around the time, let's see, in the 60s, early 60s. I was at this elementary school, and that was when Kennedy was assassinated. It's just interesting times, growing up.
And when did you start to play any musical instruments?
Let's see, that would have been in grammar school, I think. What do they call it? They call it middle school now. They have different names for school
Yeah,
now.
depending on what state you're in and when it was.
Correct. Yes. I took up a cornet in I don't know, it must have been like fifth or sixth grade, and the early musical stuff also would have been bugle and drum corps. I guess my father was an assistant scoutmaster at Troop One Peacedale, which was pretty much all the underprivileged kids. We had I played drums for a while, snare drum, tenor drum, and I played bugle for a while. And we all used to sit around this big long table uh, with music and drum pads. There was an instructor for the drums. His name was Cad Graves. Um, Cad would, just go through all the rudiments and stuff with us, and we'd be practicing, and he'd be like like that, Just, he could sing all the parts. And his brother Mike was the um, bugle instructor. So he had all the brass, and his brother had the percussion. So it was kind of a cool start. I got kicked out of the school band when I was playing cornet. Um, Two of my friends were kind of egging me on. We were supposed to go on to a concert. We're sitting in the room waiting to hit the stage, and we're supposed to be very quiet at that point. But these two guys were sitting next to me, and they were like, "Hey, man, how does that horn work? Show us how it works. What do you do? What do you blow into it?" And I'm like, "Yeah, that's like this." And I blow into it, And the teacher came over and threw me out and said, you've been warned. You're not supposed to make sound. So I was out of the school band at that point. So uh, I practiced a long time for that. That was we were doing some music from South Pacific. It was Valley High, I think was the tune. I had the first part on it, so which would be the leading line, and I was practicing every day. I mean, I really had it down. And I had a good tone, everything. Actually, it didn't, it sounded really, really good. Um, and I used to step over to my front door and open it up and play. And the dog across the street would join in, So I think that's why I practice so much, because I like hearing the dog across the street howling. You know, it's one of those things.
Did you pick up the guitar at that early date, or was
No,
no?
not till like maybe junior high school. My father played a little bit. He knew about 3 or 4 chords, and just enough to play some country, western stuff. You know, like Hank Williams. Just all the country stuff. I wasn't much of a fan, you know, at that point in time of country music. But of course, nowadays I appreciate anything, you know, anything that's good.
Well, speaking of that, do you want to go into influences, early music influences?
Influences. Oh, music influences. Yeah, sure.
And how were you exposed to them as well?
Well, early on, I would have to say, you know, they were external. I didn't really have a very strong background of music in my family. I mean, we always had a piano in the house. My father played a little bit, but you know, I never took lessons or anything like that. Never studied piano. It was a player piano, so you know, we always had some kind of music going on, but you know, there was no formal education or anything like that. Although, you know, my family is very supportive, you know, when I took an interest in music. So I think, you know, the first time I think I really got into listening to music, and, you know, not listening to learn how to play it or anything, but really, you know, digging it, was like, it was a trip that we took. My uncle lived in North Carolina, so we went down to Raleigh, Durham, and on the way, we took some detours. You know, we just, you know, went to different places. We went to Virginia Beach, and there was a gazebo with a jukebox on it. And I remember listening to like the Rolling Stones, Satisfaction. You know, that was the big hit then. And let's see what else. There was Sam Cooke, Otis Redding. I was listening to all that stuff. You know, I didn't hear music like that, you know, up north very much. But it was really starting to take off, I guess, probably in the South. I remember going to an amusement park, and I got on this ride that basically it was just like a little mini roller coaster, not a real roller coaster, but just something that went around a little short track, and it went up and down, and around in a circle. And in the background, they had these, they weren't really speakers. They were like mid-range frequency horns, you know, that, you know, like the kind of PA system, like bullhorns almost.
Yeah, I remember those, yeah.
And they were broadcasting music over those while we were going on this ride. And it was like, I remember it was Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs, you know, Wooly Bully. And like, you know, people were just like totally into the music and on this ride. Everybody was, you know, waving their arms around and everything. And it was like, it was just so cool, you know, kind of hear Sam the Sham. That was the first time I heard Wooly Bully, you know. Yeah, so I mean, that was, you know, listening for me.
Was that on the same trip you were referring to with the gazebo and the jukebox?
Yeah, oh yeah, that was like the same. I think it was pretty sure it was the same trip.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, there was a lot of stuff back then. You know, I delivered papers when I was a kid. I was into what do they call it? The you know, stock car racing, but the little, you know, model cars.
Mm-hmm.
So we had a track at the bowling alley, and you know, I had a Cobra, you know, the Shelby Cobra, not like the Ford Cobra. This was more like the original Cobra, and I had like maybe 5 or 6 different cars along the way, and you know, it was a favorite pastime. In fact, I even picked up a few kits when we were down south when we were there. Because I used to build all my own stuff, you know, I'd build all my own cars, take model car bodies and put them on a frame, you know. It was like awesome, man, you know. It was a lot of fun. So I don't know. I think I got into music just earliest band I ever had was with my cousins. I think it was about 14 at the time. My cousin Jimmy was playing guitar. I was playing a little bit. My dad showed me a few chords. And at that point, you know, we were listening to all the stuff that was popular during the day. I liked Bob Dylan. I did a few Dylan songs. I think it was like, Chimes of Freedom was one of them. Tambourine Man. You know, this is about the time, you know, I started listening to him just around the time he went or was going electric, I think.
It's about 65.
Yeah, yeah, right around that time I started listening to Dylan. But I was really into both sides of Bob Dylan. I liked his early stuff and I liked his electric stuff. So, uh, my dad would take me up to Providence sometimes or up to Cranston. We'd go to these different music stores and, you know, I'd buy like records or something or maybe pick up a book. I remember I had a book of all of Bob Dylan's stuff, and it was like from his first two albums, I think, were Times Are Changing, and then it was it Another Side of Bob Dylan? I think.
The second,
Yeah.
The greatest hits one I'm thinking of came out in the early 70s, though. I can't.
Oh, yes. This was like his first two original albums.
Okay.
I think they were on Columbia. All that stuff was in the book, so you know, I was just learning how to read chord charts, and the lyrics. You know, it was like a lead sheet. You know, the lyrics would be there, the chord changes, the melody line would be written out. I couldn't read music at that point in time, but what I could do is I could follow the lyrics, and you know, the lyrics were my arrangement.
By ear, then.
Oh yeah. Yeah, and I was using the chord charts, you know, so I learned all my first chords, you know, a few chords from my father, you know, but then, you know, everything else I needed to know was right there. So I started to pick it up, and I, you know, between that and listening, you know, I was able to get a pretty good handle on the guitar, you know, to start off with. My cousin Jimmy, and our friend from up the road from Jimmy's house was Dave Olson. He had a set of Premier drums, and the three of us started together. We all, you know, we played through one amplifier. You know, we had a mic that went into the amplifier, two guitars. You know, eventually we had another guy that came in and played bass, but he didn't have a bass guitar, so he just used to play the last four strings on the guitar. And again, we were all through. You know, eventually, we did get some amps, but not before we blew up the Silvertone that we had.
Did you have any gigs with that?
Oh yeah, yeah.
What kind of parties or things like
Oh
that?
yeah, we did parties. That was first gigs we had were parties. We played at a few Grange halls. We did some school dances at different schools. Exeter, North Kingstown. I think we did play a few gigs in South Kingstown. You know, so the band, the first band that we had was called The Element of Surprise. And recently somebody still had one of our business cards, and they took a picture of it and sent it to me. I was like, wow. That was a flashback. But that was the first band. And we all played, you know, just like, you know, groups like the Zombies, the Shadows of Night, the Moody Blues. These are all early bands that, you know, people remember some of these names, the Beau Brummels, and they're all like English bands. We did Bob Dylan and stuff. We did Sam the Sham and the Pharaohs. I mean, you know, there was a lot of stuff. I mean, it was just popular music back then. That's all it was, you know, really.
Now, speaking of early influences and that kind of thing, remember a few years ago, I think it was Paul Mania gave me a CD of you playing in Boston with a band at the age of, must have been 17. And the fellow's name was Albie, not the Albie from Rhode Island, but a different Albie.
Huh.
Remember that CD? You came over to my house and picked it up?
Oh, that was Al. No, that was Albie and the Spellbinders.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did that happen? Because that's
Well, that was after high school.
All right.
Yeah. A good friend of mine was playing guitar for them, and you know, they're all guys like Joe and Tony Giorgiani. You know, they were brass players. Greg Abate, you know, he was in that band, and so anyway, my friend, I won't mention any names because he went away to Federal College for a couple of years for something, and so I filled in for him when he was gone. He never went back into the band afterwards, but you know, we started playing together after that. But I played with Albie and Spellbinders around Boston area, and we played like some of the clubs in the old Combat Zone. You know, there were strippers and everything. I mean, you know, it's like played at the North Shore and Revere Beach. These are all pretty rough areas, you know. So I cut my teeth in some pretty seedy little bars, and you know, it was a show band. You know, that was first band out of high school. You know, it was, you know, unbelievable.
Well, I remember hearing it, and now I recall it's Papa Dick Souza who gave you that CD.
Oh yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I gave it to Paul Mania, and he played some stuff on the radio from that CD.
Yeah, really.
He did. While Ed was in Boston with Albie, he wanted to mention someone whom he met or played with.
Oh, actually, we were playing in Newport. This was during one of the jazz festivals, and we were playing at a place called Leo's, and we used to call it Leo's by the lake because it was right on the harbor in Newport. And at the time, we had both Albie was singing, and we had a female vocalist named Judy Kay, and she was from Long Island. I guess somehow there was a connection with her and George Ween, who was the producer for the Newport Festival. And he came into the club to see us. And so I got to meet George Ween, and he was a pretty cool guy, actually. He got me backstage passes for the weekend for the Newport Festival, and actually Janis Joplin was playing that night. Buddy Guy and Junior Wells.
So we're to what, about 69, 70 at this
I'm
point?
thinking it must have been around maybe 68 or 69, maybe.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know for sure. But that's how I got to meet Buddy Guy and Junior Wells. I was just hanging out between sets, and got talking to Junior Wells, and he was showing me how to clean a harmonica, you know, how to take it apart and clean the reeds, put it back together. And it was I was playing some harmonica back then, you know. That was easy to carry around with you, you know, the tin sandwich.
Yeah. Easier than a Les Paul and a Fender Twin.
Yeah. Yeah, take it. So anyway, I got talking to him, and you know, he was very willing to share any knowledge, answer any questions like that. You know, he was a good proponent for music, and you know, it just it was a good inspiration for me back then.
Do you remember anything that he said to you that stuck with you for the years?
Yeah. He says, "You want to go to a party after the show?" I said, "Oh yeah, definitely." So I said, "We'll come back here at the end of, you know, before you know, the end of the show." And so their limo pulled up, and we got in, and we went. We drove down to Ocean Road or Ocean Avenue, or whatever it's called, in Newport. There was a mansion there somewhere, and they were having a party for everybody that played that night. So it was kind of cool, man. Taj Mahal, you know, his band. which as his band back then was like, you know, it was his first record had come out back then. And Janis Joplin, I mean, I was like standing right next to Janis Joplin, you know, surprised she didn't, you know, grab my, you know, my butt or something, you know.
He's known for that.
Yeah, I heard, that's what I've heard. But she was behaving herself. She was pretty cool. And Junior Wells got up on this antique table with his high noon feet, right? And he's up there and he's playing this harmonica and singing, you know, solo for the party. It was just unbelievable, man. It was so cool, you know, to get to meet those guys. You know, they were really nice.
It's a great story.
Yeah.
Don't ever get that in there. All right, going to pause and we'll go to young adults. All right, next we're moving on to the young adults. How did you get involved with the young adults, and what was your role in that band?
Well, it was all pretty much happenstance. I had met Rudy a few years before that. I picked him up hitchhiking. I guess they were restoring the train station in West Kingston. And he was, I guess they were painting and doing stuff like that. He was hitchhiking back to URI. So I picked him up in my Volkswagen, gave him a ride back up the hill, and just chatted and everything. He seemed like a nice guy. And he didn't make much about it back then, you know, just another cat, you know. So I was playing in a band then called Universal Rundle, and I remember opening up a couple of times, a couple of shows that we did with let's see, the first time was called Pigtown. That was a precursor to the young adults, believe it or not. It was Pigtown, which later became the Fabulous Motels, and that was like Dave Hansen or Sport Fisher, Rudy Cheeks, and Jeff Shore. It was John Sheriff. It was a whole bunch of people back then, and you know, it was all like, you know, RISD and stuff like that. And so we played at Edwards Auditorium, and I just remember like hearing them for the first time. It was like, you know, I didn't like know what to make out of them, you know.
Were they the young adults then, or were they
No.
still the hotel?
No, then it was the Fabulous Motels.
Okay, motel.
And Dan Gosh, they had, you know, Dave Hansen was the drummer, but they also had Dan Gosh playing percussion. He had a toy set of drums, and he was set up right in the center of the stage. And he had on his hi-hat, you know, the little cymbal that goes up and down, he had a skull mounted on top of the hi-hat. So whenever he played the hi-hat, the skull would go up and down. It was just like, it was like, so, you know, Charlie Rocket. You remember Charlie
Yes,
Rocket?
he was on Saturday Night Live.
Yeah, Charles Rocket. He was in that band, and you know, he went on to much greater things. You know, he became a character actor after Saturday Night Live. He had quite a few excellent roles with Tom Cruise and with some other, you know. But that's the one I remember. He was in a movie with Tom Cruise. I was like, yeah, man, this guy's doing all right.
So at what point is this show with the Fabulous Motels there? Was about
well, I was another. There was another band that I played in a couple of years later. I pulled together, you know, we played down at the Bonneview in Narragansett, you know, for about 2 or 3 months. We just, you know, Kenny Lyon had been playing there. He went on the road with Mott the Hoople, and I guess his band was touring with Queen and Mott the Hoople.
So that's early Queen, Mott the Hoople, 71, 72.
Yeah, so he'd been playing at the Bonneview for a couple of years, like 3 nights a week. It was like this, he was like the house band there. And they were all playing blues. And so when we formed our band, we figured, well, we'll keep the crowd there. We did the same kind of book. You know, we did, you know, a lot of the same stuff. You know, the same kind of stuff. We, you know, mixed it up. We didn't play the same tunes that he did, but we had our own repertoire. But we kept the crowd there for a good 3 months, and then the guy, Dave, whatever his name was, the owner, sold the bar, and our band split up. So anyway, Jeff Shore was playing in that band with me, and he invited me up to this little cinder block building on Richmond Street in Providence, to try out with this band that they were starting called the Young Adults, and I guess they were doing okay with original material and stuff like that. They were they had Rudy Cheeks and Sport Fisher, and they were primarily writing all the material with Jeff. Jeff was sort of the musical cat. He was doing the arranging and helping out with that kind of thing. But they needed somebody who could play guitar, and so that's how they got started. I think it was around, was it 74, 75? Anyway, it was good with all this information, details like that, years and dates and everything. It's like Bruce,
an estimate.
Rudy Cheeks is good with that stuff.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So that was just the start. I think our first gig we played at the Bond View, which is where Jeff and I were playing. New owner had taken over, and I remember going to him and saying, listen, my friend Frank Pickles, his birthday's coming up. It was in December. And, we want to bring the band in and play a party for him. So we'll bring some people in, and the guy was like, yeah, he was all for it. So we charged like $1 at the door. At the beginning of the night, we put Frank Pickles at the door, his own birthday party. He collected the cover charges and everything. As the night went on, we played. Frank got more and more inebriated as time went on, as people kept buying him shots and everything. So that was the first Young Adults gig. And at the end of the night, we were trying to find the money, Frank, I guess he had the wad in his back pocket. At some point, it must have fallen out of his pocket. So it was like, I don't know, but we looked at the bar underneath one of the stools, and we found there was like a wad of cash on the floor.
Somebody found it. That's good.
Unbelievable. So that was our first Young Adults gig. Anyway.
So how then, remember the Cobra Snake for a necktie thing, moving on
yeah.
down the road, which was with Bo Diddley, Young Adults.
Well, yeah, as time progressed, we had quite a following. I mean, we were playing like Lupo's. We played there a lot. We played at what was it called, Harpo's over at Newport a lot. We played just a lot of the clubs. I mean, like in Rhode Island and everything, and then to travel a little bit, from time to time. We played in New York, and played mostly around the Northeast region. But we had a real good following. And Lupo wanted to get Bo Diddley to play, and he needed a backup band. So that's how that all came about. First, it was like two consecutive years that he came. First time he came, we played 2 weekends. I think we did like Thursday, Friday, Saturday. Then the next weekend we did Thursday, Friday, Saturday. And in between, we played a gig at the Maximum Security at ACI.
Mm.
Yeah, that was interesting. It's not the first time I played a gig in the prison there. I played in Minimum Security once with another band I was in. But yeah, Bo Diddley was like really cool. Dug the band. Following year, I think it was '78, he came back again, and we did a bunch of shows at Lupo's, and Jim Walpaugh was doing a documentary film at the time. This was at 16 millimeter film or something.
Yeah, the original.
Yeah. So that's up on my YouTube page. You know, now that was broadcast on some local TV station, and somebody snagged it. I got a copy of it, so I'll just put that up there. But um, so people have seen it. I've quite a few hits on that. I'm not quite how many people have viewed that. You can probably see it.
Yeah.
You know, if you go there.
Yeah, YouTube it. Yeah.
Yeah, YouTube.com, EdVallee. I think it's under that name.
Any special memories of Bo Diddley and those two particular?
Yeah, we went to the studio with him,
Oh.
and I remember being really pleasantly surprised at how diverse he was in his musical, his musical interest, because he always was a little concerned about being typecast as Bo Diddley, and being like, you hear Bo Diddley, it's always like that, the Bo Diddley beat, jump, 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 that kind of thing. And we did some other stuff in the studio that was like, a little different from, what people normally are used to hearing from Bo Diddley. So it was nice. I don't know whatever happened to any of those recordings. I guess maybe they must be in his archives. His family probably has them somewhere.
Interesting. It'll be something interesting to find one day.
Yeah.
How about Complex World? How'd that come about?
The movie?
Yes.
Oh, that was a young adults reunion. This is quite a while after the band had been defunct, and there's always been, from time to time, a resurgence of people would say, "Man, I wish the young adults would get back together, man."
And it happened twice.
Yeah, it happened twice. Yeah, recently, and happened a few times before that. I mean, it's always, but it's a weird thing, But this last time, it was, it was a lot of fun. I didn't participate in all of them,
Mm-hmm. But you were in the Complex World thing, or was that?
Oh yeah, I mean, I don't know. I think I was more like a guest appearance. I played on, I think, what was it, 3 or 4 tunes, or something like that for the recording.
Uh-huh.
I don't even remember which ones they were, to be honest with you. I think it was, I know one of them was, there's a tune that Rudy wrote about, the history lesson there.
Yeah. Pretty funny.
Yeah. Oh, New Deal Boogie. Yeah.
Yes.
I was on that. Honestly, I can't remember. It didn't make that much of an impression on me, I guess.
It's a pretty funny song, though. So
Yeah.
I want to take a pause, and then I want to go on to the Providence music scene.
Okie dokie, Smokey.
Okie dokie. The next question brings us to Providence. During the 70s and 80s, can you tell us what you know and your experience with the Providence music scene? Not necessarily having to do with the band you're with, but who played there, who'd you go see, and stuff like that.
Well, during the time, young adults were around. That's pretty much when we used to practically spend a lot of time in Providence, because we would, there was a bunch of places that you could go, and they were all within walking distance, right in the heart of the city. You had the living room, you had the Met, you had Lupo's, you had the Last Call, and between all those places, I mean, you could just go right from one to the other. Sometimes, the Last Call, man, had some really great stuff. I mean, I saw Eric Burden there with his group, and then we saw Big Mama Thornton.
Wow.
We saw Albert Collins. Willie Dixon. I saw him there. No, was it Willie Dixon? I don't know, man, but I'll tell you what, and then there were all the local acts and everything, local people. I mean, like, it was this Donald Smith. this B3 player, and it was he was living then, you know. But Donald was like Jimmy Smith. He played that kind of organ, you know, B3, and I got invited to a few jam sessions that he played at, and it was just like, it was so cool, man. It was so cool, like, you know, it's some of the musical exposure. Just a lot of fun, man, playing the blues, you know, and the blues side of jazz, you know, with guys like Donald.
Do you have any other special memories of Providence during that period?
Oh, lots. Yeah, a lot. I don't know. Just pretty much it was just, you know, being immersed in music at that point in time. After the young adults, I want to say maybe around 77, I was starting to move up towards Boston and Cambridge, Mass. I was living there. So anything from like the late, maybe 77, 78 on, I was spending a lot more time up around that area. There were some places we used to play up there with the young adults too. You know, we used to play the In Square Men's Bar in Cambridge, and we used to play at Jonathan Swift's, which was right in Harvard Square. There was a pretty big music scene up in Boston at the time, you know. I remember seeing Toots and the Maytals at the Orson Welles Cinema opening. They had an opening for motion picture that came out then called The Harder They Come.
All right, Jimmy Cliff.
Yeah.
Was there any connection between the Providence and the Boston scene at all? Was there any going back and forth or sharing of?
And there was somewhat, but I mean, Providence was like very unique, and I don't want to say there wasn't any connection, but if anything, it was kind of a disconnect, I think. You know, because I mean, you know, it's like Boston had its own scene, and you know, its own bands played, and you know, there was a few bands that you know got to, you know, play in Rhode Island or vice versa. You know, like we play in Boston, Cambridge, but there wasn't really a lot of musical exchange going between them two cities.
What was unique about Providence?
Well, you had that's where Talking Heads started. We used to do a lot of shows with them. We did concerts like at RISD and stuff like that, Brown University. I don't know. I don't know what's so unique about. There was a connection, more of a connection between Austin, Texas, and Providence.
Okay.
You know, then you know, much more a connection between those two cities. I think they were like sister cities.
Sure.
They had like all these cats, like Sugar Ray and the Blue Tones, and Duke Robillard, and what was it? The group from Austin.
Thunderbirds?
The Thunderbirds, yeah, T-Birds, man. Yeah, a big connection here. We can only get that.
Okay. Fine. Okay.
All right, so that connection, between Austin and Providence, that included guys like Stevie Ray Vaughan and, you know, the Thunderbirds. Just very vibrant music scene here, you know. Cats like Jaco Pastorius used to play at Lupo's a lot, and man, it was just unbelievable.
I think it's interesting that you have the blues on the one hand, which had a big resurgence like in the early '80s, and there's this theatrical component of the Providence music scene when you look at the Talking Heads or the Young Adults and all the stuff that was on the stage and the way the folks dressed on the stage. Is that what made it slightly unique?
Oh yeah, you know, that's true. I'll tell you, that's true. We we had that thing happening, and I think the main concern with me, with when the precursor to the young adults was like the Fabulous Motels, and I think when the young adults formed, I think it had you could see how it evolved musically. So and I think it was musically, I think it was a stronger group, because now we had a lot of more experience
Mm-hmm.
behind us, and people were coming to see us. I remember seeing Doc Pomus in the audience several times. When we played at Lupo's, he would come all the way from New York to see us. I guess he was. He also followed Roomful of Blues. He was a big fan of Roomful of Blues, and he set up a couple of things for us in the city, New York. We met with Joel Dorn. He was producing Leon Redbone at the time, and there was another cat. I can't remember his name. He was like the president of Island Records.
Yes.
You know who that was?
I remember the record company.
Yeah, he came out to see us in a bar we were playing at in Connecticut someplace. And that's actually how that tune Beer came about. The song was really just about having this guy come out and see us from this big record company. And, when we wrote the song, it was like, we blew our lunches, and with it a record deal, So it was like about drinking beer and being like totally out of control and everything. So, well, what actually happened was, he drove up in this limo. He came into the club. He sat down, and I guess we accidentally spilled a glass of red wine on him. And this guy was wearing like $800 Armani suits and shit, So he kind of, I don't think he was impressed with the band.
Well, what I'm seeing or understanding is that the question I asked was the blues and the theatrical part seem to both be popular in Providence, and maybe that's the connection there, is that if you listen to young adults or talking heads, and you listen to like Duke on the guitar, there's this amazing musicianship. It's not just whacked out crazy.
Well,
There's a structure.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. That's true. It was more structured, and it was musically more coherent than any of the previous, four bands that were the precursors for the young adults.
Huh.
Yeah, that's true. Absolutely true what you're saying. That's why I think they brought me into the band. I think there was a few other people that were trying out for the band, and I think they were like, they were good writers and they were good conceptualists, but the young adults already had all that stuff, and they needed stronger music. They needed real solid rhythm section. And that's what I brought to the band. I think Jeff and I,
musician types too, to come see it, because it wasn't just theatrical. It was like really good.
Yeah, well, when Jeff brought me into the band, that's why he did it, because Jeff and I had been playing together, and we had we were very solid, man. Jeff and I played together like chickpeas and rice. There's a real solid connection there. Real nice guy. Real nice guy. We always had a great time, and good gig. Really good gig.
Take a pause and go to Steve.
Yeah, I suppose so. Yeah.
Okay. All right, then we're going to skip ahead a little bit chronologically and ask how you got involved with Steve Smith and the Nakeds.
Well, there was a few things that foreshadowed that. After the young adults, I kind of went into a musical hiatus for maybe about 14 years. I mean, I wasn't doing it professionally at that point anymore. Went back to college and studying digital electronics, programming, stuff like that. I was at school at MIT at night, working during the day, just busting my chops basically, and because you really need to have a very, very strong belief system to stay in music. Okay, so I actually did quite well, and eventually, I started off at the bottom, and working, jobs in engineering firms. I started off as a detail draftsman. I worked my way up. I became a designer. I designed, and I got into circuit boards, and all this stuff was concurrent with what I was learning in school. Eventually, I became a development engineer, and I worked up until maybe the early, well, late 80s, maybe early 90s. By that time, I was doing a lot of consulting work, because at that point in time, a lot of the electronics industry was being outsourced to other countries, like China, Thailand, and India, overseas, whatever. So we were losing a lot of work, and it was very difficult to stay employed. So I kind of fell back onto the music side of the fence at that time, and I hooked up with a songwriter, and we partnered on some stuff, and ended up kind of like in a romantic relationship. So we lived in New York. I lived there in the city for about 3 years, and we were writing and going out and playing duo gigs and in small venues, Lower East Side, and a few places, Midtown and stuff like that. So, and after a while, I mean, New York is like, it's a tough nut to crack, so it's it's like being a small fish in a big pond, and it's really, you don't have a lot of connections there. It's, if you don't know anyone there, if you're not part of the scene there, you know what I mean? It's just really takes a long, long time, and people are playing there, to be exposed, so you don't really. It's not about making money, but you need money to survive, and certainly you can die of exposure. So, but all that led to me deciding to move back to New England, or this area, and so we kind of split up, and we went our separate ways. And when I came back, I saw my old friend George, who I played with Kenny Lyon in the mid '80s. And George was playing with Steve Smith and the Naked, so I asked him how they were doing, if they were looking for a guitar player or anything. I was back. I needed to start playing again, So he said, "Well, sorry, man." He said, "We were just trying out guitar players." He said, "We just went through all that." He said, "We got about 4 or 5 guys now, and I think we're going to go with one of them." Okay, so a few weeks go by, phone rings, It's George. "Hey, can you come down to the rehearsal tonight and play a few tunes with us?" I'm like, "Yeah, sure." So I went, played. This is a band now. This is another horn band. So they have a book. They have musical charts, arrangements. Mostly for the horns. And that was a couple of tunes I hadn't played before. I was able to read charts. Just well, good enough to be able to cut the gig. So and there were some tunes they were doing that I already knew. So we played maybe 4 or 5 tunes, and took a break and went into the office where we were practicing. Was a martial arts studio during the day.
That was Steve's, wasn't it?
Yeah, Steve and Rui. So so Steve says, "Hey," he said, "What can I tell you?" He says, "The gig's yours if you want it." And I said, "Well, shit, I'll have to think about it." Steve, Yeah, I want it. That was cool, man, because at that point, they had been during the summer months. I guess mostly they were going up and down the East Coast, pretty much the Mid-Atlantic region, Florida, some gigs up north, whatever, here and there, with Clarence Clemens, who at the time, was not playing with Springsteen and the E Street Band at that time, because I think that's where Bruce had split,
He
made
broke up the band.
embarked on his solo career.
57 channels and nothing on. Oh, anyway.
Yeah. So we were very blessed and fortunate to have made a connection with Clarence, and man, it's so much fun playing with them. And we had a tour bus and everything. Man, we had a great time. I remember one time we were on our way to this place out in Amagansett, Long Island. It's right out near the tip of Long Island, And we had stopped at this big rest stop along the way. There was this big paved area, so we got out to get some exercise. We had this thing called a vortex ball, just shaped like a football, but it has wings on the back of it. And you could throw this thing, and it was like, you could throw it like, 150 yards. I mean, it was like, it would sail through the air, right? So Pete was our keyboard player. I'm out there playing with him, and he says, Ed, go deep. So I'm running out, and he throws the thing to me. It's a long pass, man. I could see it coming, and it looked like it was going to go over my head. So I started running, but I was running backwards, and I tripped up, and my head hit the pavement. And they were telling me later that they could hear it all the way, like about 100 yards away at the bus, sitting there. And when they heard me and saw me go down like that, they were like, but I don't know, somehow, miraculously, I don't know, my head must be made of like, wood or something. I don't know. Because like I got up, nothing, no concussion, no bleeding. I'm like, wow, man, it's unbelievable. So ever since then, it was like, years and years later, every time I see Pete, he's like, hey, go deep. Yeah, okay.
Wow.
So I mean, we had fun times on the road, stuff like that happen all the time,
Any memories of Clarence or any gigs you want to recall?
Well, yeah, that gig at Amagansett, man. That was this tune he used to play. I love this tune. It's called Road to Paradise. It was an instrumental. And I just remember the performance that night. It was just very powerful, Whenever I think of Clarence, I think of that tune.
Do you remember which one it was?
Yeah, the Road to Paradise.
Road to Paradise. You said that. Short-term memory lapse.
Yeah. Yeah. No, sometimes I like to sit around sometimes, and if I'm just noodling on the guitar, and start playing that sometimes. But it's different every time you play it. It's one of those kinds of songs. It depends on how you feel,
And you're still doing the Nakeds gig.
Still doing it, man.
20-some years later?
Oh, gosh, what is it, 20-some years? Let's see. I joined up with them, I think it was 1992. Yeah, so still going strong. We were inducted in 2013.
Right.
And then this past year, what was it? This year, 2016.
3 weeks ago.
Yeah, I got inducted with the young adults. That was kind of cool.
Yep.
I'm a two-timer.
Two-timer. I know. So when you tour with the Nakeds, I know what I want to ask.
Yeah.
Were you involved with when Steve did the thing with his brother for Family Guy?
Oh yeah.
The song I'm big in the babes
I'm
go wild.
huge and the babes go wild. Yeah.
Right.
Well, that's an old tune. You know, that goes back from before the time I was with the band. So Danny Smith is Steve's brother. He's a executive producer on that program, and you know, it's good to know somebody. I mean, you know, they took our song and they created an image, you know, our caricatures, and put together a composite of some previous episodes of Family Guy, made it into one one video, music video, pretty much.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that went viral. I mean, that's on. I think it's still up on YouTube somewhere. But really, that was quite an experience, you know.
Take a pause and then go on to stuff today. Recall. All right, the last question I have is, what would you like to share about Ed Vallee's solo career, including songwriting, recording, performing, and things of that nature?
Well, I'll tell you what. You know, that's a very interesting subject because, you know, it's not like the band, and it's not like all this other stuff that kind of comes easy and automatically. You know, you just go in and you do it. It's a gig. It's fun. You get paid. Blah blah blah. You know, this involves a lot of other things, like, you know, getting over roadblocks and stuff like that. You know, being able to, you know, be creative, to write, do stuff like that. You know, at this point in time, it's a little difficult because, you know, I really need to be organized and, you know, manage my time and, you know, be able to sit down and focus on something for more than a couple of hours, you know, to work. And there's so many other things going on. It just, you know, takes away from that. You know, it's really hard to do. So, I mean, I have a desire to you know, do some recording and, you know, put something out there. But it doesn't come very easy to me. You know, it's very difficult. It takes a long time, and, you know, I've got a lot of other stuff that needs to get done, and, you know, I don't have myself on the priority list right now. You need to be on the list. You know, it doesn't have to be number one, but at least you got to be up there somewhere. So I'm working on it. You know, I'm just trying to go one day at a time right now and get through some of the things that have to get done in order to.
Well, you did have a recording, 1969. Wasn't that the name of the song?
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah, you know, the average, maybe a couple of tunes, might be able to complete one or two tunes in a year or two. You know, that seems to be the way it's been going. I just wrote a song. Well, it's an old song that I redid, called "The Only One," and I did rearrange this, and I did it for the Nakeds. So we're doing it now. It's a nice tune, and it's like it's a Latin feel, you know. But yeah, definitely. I mean, I had some time where I was able to devote in between, you know, moving from one crisis to another. It's like, you know, that's like the Zen thing, man. There's a lot of suffering and difficulty and pain going on in the world, and you have to alleviate it. And once it's alleviated, then you have that time in between to devote to stuff like that, you know, for yourself. I mean, it's like the dude, you know, he likes nothing more than to sit in his tub and drink White Russians, you know, but always something is coming along and interrupting his you know, what he likes to do, what he enjoys doing. In his case, it's not doing very much of anything, but enjoying life. You know, uh, having a white Russian is like it's a luxury. You know, so um, that's what we're doing. You know, we're trying to you know prioritize things so that have to get done, that need to get done. And then, you know, maybe your reward for that is being able to enjoy the simpler things.
Very philosophical, Mr. Vallee. 1969, the song.
Yes.
Remember seeing it the first time on Facebook. Was that a solo song release, like on iTunes?
1969, I did in my studio, my own studio. And my studio is like, you know, it's piecemeal. You know, it's recently, you know, I've stepped it up a little bit. I could probably record a couple of tracks simultaneously now, but back then, you know, it was like piecemeal. You know, you record the drums and you put some bass on it, and you know, just add stuff as you're going along, one thing at a time. So I played all of the keyboards. I played the bass, guitars, everything. There's a drum track on it that's like it's canned. It's not a real drummer. So you know, I would like to re-record it in the studio with a real drummer, and you know, have other people play on it so it has more of a true human feeling. You know, but it's a nostalgic song. It's called 1969. It dates back to the days when I used to hang out at the beach during the summer with my friends, and you know, just you know, like again, it was one of those periods of time where you don't have to worry about it very much. You know, it's
Right.
you know,
And there were a lot of Rhode Island references in the song, as I recall.
yeah.
Keep talking. I'm gonna close the door. Where's that guy? What was that one?
He's blowing off the sidewalk out there.
Yeah, it should come through. So what were some of the song references of Rhode Island, as I recall? Was there something about Peacedale in there?
Well, in that song,
Yeah.
let's see. There was one at Seawall in Narragansett. Yeah, there's a reference to the Seawall in Narragansett where we used to sit, and you know, sometimes we'd have like Gansett in the giant imperial quart. And we each have our little quart of beer, and we'd be sitting there drinking, or you know, sometimes we'd smoke weed, whatever, you know.
Yeah.
And that's in the song, basically. We get sometimes we get this, you know, cops would come along and break everything up because we'd be loitering pretty much, according to them. But that's what people do at the Narragansett Pier. You sit on the wall and you loiter. Yeah.
There we go. Well, actually, maybe that's a good place to end it then, actually.
Yeah.
The song 1969 with the great references to our wonderful Narragansett Seawall.
But it also, at the beginning of the song, makes a reference to, you know, now, you know, because it's like, you know, somehow, or the words are like, somehow you look different, but I'm the one who changed. I'm getting older now, and it's not the same. The things that matter to me, somehow, they don't ring true. I used to, what was it? I can't remember a lot of words.
Right. The philosophical sentiment is there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So the very first verse kind of puts you in the within a framework, you know, of now, and then when you get to the second verse, it's like longing for the older days, you know, and then it goes into it, and it takes you right back there. So but you can always go there, you know. It's like it's a place. It's like those places you keep in your mind, and you can transport yourself back in time. You know, just by, you know, closing your eyes and reliving the memories, you know.
Sure. That's deep, man. Yeah. Well, thank you, Ed Vallee. Today, by the way, was May 24th, 2016, and we're at Ed's home in Richmond, Rhode Island. I want to thank you very much, Ed.
Signing off.
Signing off.